"Stanley, look at this," Helen said, pointing to a page. "A red see-through nightie. How would you like to see me coming to bed in that?" Stanley looked at the picture. "You'd look better in a golf cart." "That's the trouble with you," Helen sighed. "You wouldn't even notice if I came to bed wearing nothing." "You're wrong there," Stanley grunted. "I'd be the first to complain." Back upstairs, the couch was finally finished. It was firm, lumpy, and slightly crooked, but it was theirs. "Okay," Jana said, wiping her brow. "Now for the wallpaper." "No," Jack and Chrissy shouted in unison. "Let's go to the pub," Jack suggested. "My treat. Well, my presence is my treat. You two can pay." Chapter 9. The Regal Beagle Confrontation. The Regal Beagle was the trio's home away from Homadark, wood-paneled pub where the beer was cold and the problems were usually left at the door. They sat at their usual table, nursing 3 mugs of ale. "Look at that poor guy," Jack whispered, nodding toward a large, muscular man sitting at the bar. He was flanked by 2 women who looked significantly more interested in his biceps than his conversation. "He looks like he's having a great time," Chrissy said. "He's stuck with 2 broads," Jack said, puffing out his chest. "I think I'll do him a favor and go talk to him." "Jack, stay here," Jana warned. But Jack was on a roll. He had been feeling a bit unmanly lately, thanks to the constant nagging about chores and his secret identity. He needed to prove he was the alpha. He walked up to the bar. "Hi, honey," he said to one of the women. "Buy you a drink." The woman looked him up and down. "No thanks. Why don't you take a walk?" "I've got a 35-foot cabin cruiser," the big man at the bar growled, turning to face Jack. He was roughly the size of a small refrigerator. "Oh," Jack said, his voice jumping an octave. "Well, take a cruise. Go ahead. I was just checking the weather." "Are you with anybody?" the man asked, standing up. He towered over Jack. "I'm with them," Jack said, pointing toward Jana and Chrissy. "Listen, son," the man said, stepping into Jack's space. "But out. The last guy who warned me about something got all his teeth knocked out." Jack looked at the man's fists. They were the size of hams. "Oh, well, my father paid a fortune for my braces. I wouldn't want to waste his money." Jack turned and practically ran back to the table. "That was fantastic, Jack," Jana said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You really stood up to him." "I didn't want to cause a scene," Jack insisted, his heart hammering against his ribs. "It's the civilized way." Just then, Stanley Roper walked in, holding his jaw. He saw the big man at the bar and, unaware of the tension, sat right next to him. "Barkeep," Stanley yelled. "Give me a brandy. My tooth is killing me." The big man bumped Stanley's elbow. "Hey," Stanley barked. "Watch where you're putting your elbows, you clumsy idiot. Where do all these stupid people come from?" The bar went silent. Jack watched, horrified, expecting Stanley to be turned into a grease spot on the floor. But the big man looked at Stanley. He looked at the older man's small stature and the sheer, unfiltered grumpiness on his face. "I'm sorry, Pop," the man said, surprisingly quiet. "Didn't mean to bother you." Stanley turned to the bartender. "See that? You just have to know how to handle them." Jack sat at the table, his ego shattered. Stanley Roper, the man who wore cardigans and hid from his wife, was more of a man than he was. Chapter 10: The Hero of Vietnam Not Really. The next morning, Jack was in a deep depression. He refused to cook. He refused to even look at an egg. "I'm yellow," Jack moaned, lying face down on the newly upholstered couch. "I've got chicken in my blood." "Jack, cut it out," Jana said. "You did the right thing." He was huge. Even the kids at school could spot it. Jack continued. "That Kenny Jensen used to beat me up every morning unless I gave him a nickel. I put him through college. He who fights and runs away lives to fight another day." Chrissy offered. "I didn't fight or run away," Jack wailed. "I just stood there and apologized for my father's dental bills." That night, they went back to the pub. Jack was determined to redeem himself, though he wasn't quite sure how. The big man was there again. This time, he was arguing with a different woman. "This is it," Jack whispered. "I'm going in." "Jack, don't," Jeanette pleaded. Jack walked up. "Hey, man," he said, his voice surprisingly steady. "You behaved like a creep in here last night, insulting women, knocking drinks over. You owe someone an apology." The big man turned around. He looked ready to roar. But before he could speak, Jana stepped in. "Wait," she cried. "Don't hit him. He's got a steel plate in his head." The man paused. "A steel plate?" "Yes," Jana lied heroically. "He got it saving his platoon in Vietnam. He's a war hero. If you hit him, the shock might, well, it might blow up the whole block." The man looked at Jack. He saw the grease-stained apron Jack was still wearing and the look of sheer terror in his eyes. He assumed it was the 1,000-yard stare of a combat veteran. "I'm sorry," the man said, backing away. "I didn't know. Respect, man, respect." The man turned and left the pub. "You were fantastic, Jack," Chrissy squealed. "You stood up to him." "Yeah," Jack said, finally breathing again. "Even though I thought he might murder me. I guess you were a hero." Jana smiled. "Even if you didn't go to Vietnam." "What's that?" Jack asked, pointing to a menu. "Cambodian," Jana laughed. Chapter 11: The Case of the Missing Rent. The final week of the month arrived, and with it, the terrifying reality of the rent. $300. In 1977, it might as well have been $1 million. Jana had been saving. She had a white envelope marked rent sitting on the shelf in the living room, right under the transistor radio. "Jack, have you seen the envelope?" Jana asked one morning, her voice rising in panic. "The one with the money?" Jack asked, coming out of the bathroom. "No." "Why?" "It's gone. The radio is here, but the envelope is gone. Burglars Chrissy gasped. We've been ripped off. Like those guys in 105. 107, Jack corrected. They searched the apartment.